A white X.
Hello, my name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching a special episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. We will be discussing the history of the Margate City Boardwalk. I'm here with meteorologist Dan Skeldon and Commissioner John Amodeo.
And we're on the Margate Fishing Pier on a nice Saturday in September. Really a nice beach day. I mean, you get the second season crowd, so you're not going to get a crowd really. A little bit of a breeze. It's partly sunny. We're hoping the weather holds out. A couple sprinkles around. It should be a pretty good day. And a nice day to talk a little history with Commissioner Amodeo.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're talking about the Margate Boardwalk, and you may be thinking, we're not talking about the current controversy of bringing it back. We're talking about the one that was.
Exactly, Dan. And we can go back in history and a little bit of research that I've personally done, and the research that the Margate Public Library through librarian Glenn Mead helped me through to learn a little bit, being a Margate resident basically my whole life, and learning about the several storms that hit us, the origination, the concept that started as South Atlantic City was the first concept back at the turn of the century in the early 1900s. And it took almost to 1906 for them to prepare the paperwork to go out for bid on the request of the commissioners at that time, the Common Council of Southern Atlantic City. 1906, they went through a bidding process, and there was challenges by several other contractors that put it on delay, and actually they started the work and completed the process in 1909. Little did everybody know, by 1909 we had a boardwalk in Margate City known as Southern Atlantic City.
All right, so I mean, the boardwalk that exists now is Atlantic City, goes to Ventnor, goes to the Margate line. Where was that boardwalk in Margate when it first existed?
It came from the Fredericksburg property line at the Ventnor end, and it came in sections. It wasn't a contiguous boardwalk at that point. The interesting thing, Dan, is the cost at that time was just a little over $22,000 to put 2,500 foot of boardwalk, 20 foot wide. I did bring pictures that we might be able to show later on in the show to show people the location of the boardwalk and where it existed and the devastation after all the storms. But I think a good thing, as you as a meteorologist studying weather and understanding storms, the most critical part of a structure on a beachfront is the damage that can be incurred through the years.
Now, for those who don't know, how would you compare Margate's old boardwalk with Ventnor or Atlantic City or even Ocean City? Was it more like a Ventnor boardwalk?
Great question. Boardwalk, on angles, it wasn't a continuous straight line, basically like Atlantic City is, even though there's two very shallow curves in the Atlantic City boardwalk, and Ventnor is a straight line. Margate's boardwalk at the turn of the century, the first sections were, they meandered around, because as you can see in the background, Margate's beachfront isn't a straight line. There's differences with, I guess, through the years with riparian rates going in and out, and the boardwalk had to be meandered around and had, in some places, 90-degree angles.
Okay, Margate used to have the boardwalk then, and nature has slowly reclaimed it. I mean, was it one storm that did it, or was it a multitude or a series of storms that eventually, left Margate boardwalk?
Exactly. And you know what happens is we see today constant nor'easters. A lot of that is wind, and as you know better than I do, coastal flooding. Back in 1914 was the first major storm that affected the structure of the boardwalk, and that was only a brief 5 years after it originally opened up. And in 1914, they claimed that the gale winds were a maximum of 40 miles an hour, not compared to what we see today.
Right.
And damage occurred, not to any big extent. The damage was basically $20,000 in cost at that time for Margate to repair their boardwalk. Shortly after that, in 1920, the With the location of the boardwalk being so close to the water line when it was first built, it was really on, I would say, the high tide mark, like Ventnor's Boardwalk used to be before they had a beach fill. At times, as I was growing up and I was on the Ventnor Boardwalk, the tide would, at high tide, would come underneath the boardwalk. So then in 1920, there was probably the most devastating storm of that time, which caused severe damage to both Longport's Boardwalk, Ventnor's, Atlantic City. They lost from Caspian to Massachusetts. It stayed intact from Massachusetts to Albany Avenue. Most of the damage back then was, in 1920, was to Chelsea, Ventnor, Margate, and some of very little to Longport. In fact, the numbers were pretty substantial. I think at that time, Margate's damage was in the 15, it was either 15,000. The least damage was to Longport. And they proceeded. The councils and the commissions all got together because they felt it was a great asset to the community. It was a form of recreation. It was a tourist attraction. And naturally, we're a tourism industry basis here on the Barrier Islands. So they elected to rebuild it again. So it was in good shape from 1914 through, the big storm that history marks as probably one of the biggest storms that ever hit Absecon Island and the coast, probably from Sandy Hook to Cape May. And that was the storm of 44.
That's right. A hurricane that never made landfall in New Jersey. It was, if you have grandparents that were here, the residents that lived through it, it was a very bad hurricane, 100-mile-an-hour winds, more winds than we saw in Sandy, more wind than we saw in Jonas or whatnot, or Irene, but it actually never made landfall. The storm actually stayed about 50, 75 miles off the coast, and then it hooked out to sea. But you don't need to make landfall to cause a lot of damage, and the 44 storm did.
Yes, and it's from newspaper articles from the Courier Post in Camden, dated back to March 9, 1945. The September 14th storm of 44 created $7,112,000 in damages from the tip of Atlantic City to the tip of Longport, with most of the damage in Atlantic City, and $1,000 in Ventnor, $1 million in Ventnor, $1.3 million in Margate. Very little damage to Longport, but the major damage was to the Atlantic City Boardwalk, and that was the assessment at that time.
Now you compared in the beginning, you said it would cost about $20,000 to build the boardwalk, or what did you just say?
It was $22,000 with the. It was not. It went out for bid. It was $19,226,000, but $19,226. Excuse me. And in relation to today's cost with the consumer index, it would equate to about $550,000-$600,000.
Wow.
And that was for 2,500 foot.
Is there a reason that, I guess this stands to reason that if Atlantic City and Ventnor, had damages to their boardwalks from the storms, and their boardwalks were intact. Now, was Margate's more susceptible? Was Margate's just more completely destroyed and wasn't worth rebuilding? I guess one of the questions is, why not rebuild the Margate one if it was an asset and the others still exist today?
Well, Dan, as you know, Mother Nature plays its games.
Yep.
And some places are more vulnerable, just like when a tornado pops out of the clear, it hits just one spot and not others. I have no way of answering that question other than the fact, I think after the 44 storm, the commissioners in Margate felt that the expenses to repair at that point were so exuberant that they didn't want to affect the taxpayers, and they elected to just do the demolition and the cleanups of the torn parts, which Palma has a picture here, and I'm not sure if it'll work out being able to be cited.
And we'll try to scan these and put them in the comments section of the live stream as well. Yeah.
And that was where there were segments. There were segments that were cleaned up and functional, but it wasn't a continuous work.
Any information at its peak, how continuous it was, like in between all the storms and in its cold every day, how long the Margate Boardwalk stretched?
No,
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot, but I couldn't find that in any of the work that I did looking at the history of the Margate Boardwalk. The only thing I have is in front of me, I have something from Philadelphia Courier dated July 17, Caspian to Jackson, and at present, Massachusetts Avenue to Albany. So there was an interruption in there of the Atlantic City Boardwalk, and I'm sure parts of Margate. Margate and Longport were torn away by the hurricane, but there are no plans for reconstructing it to any further length. So that tells you the evidence 2 years later that there was not going to be any reconstruction of the Margate Boardwalk. And prior to that, as far as the existence of it, as when Palma's original question was, it wasn't a straight line, so there were breaks in it, and I think they had access to the streets where it ended, and then you would have to go a few streets, is what I'm guessing, to get on the next segment of Boardwalk.
And I'm guessing too. I think it's great that you did this. Was it fun doing the research on this and digging up the information?
It's unbelievable how much I enjoyed it, because you're learning something that all I can remember is the other storm in the 60s.
62 nor'easter. Yep.
Yeah, the 62 nor'easter, which tore beaches, and I, went into my house because there was 2 foot of water in the bay. But the interest is to learn how it originated, the costs, and through the years, it's been a very vulnerable structure. And Atlantic City has survived many storms since dunes were built in front of it, and I think Ventnors survived many storms because dunes have been in front of it. So I think that the dunes have, they qualify for protection of property and public life.
I think any structure on any barrier island is vulnerable, especially one right up against the ocean. But that also survives too. If Margate's was more segmented, the ocean, when it comes up in storms, can attack it on both sides. When if you have one solid structure, it might be a little more able to withstand storm.
Exactly.
Now, when it was originally built and finished in 1909, do you think that they anticipated that our area would be so susceptible to these storms?
Well, we learn every day. We can't let our guard down, and that's why we depend on weather people like Dan, meteorologists like Dan Skeleton, to keep us abreast and prepared. We know almost at any time we can be affected by the weather. I think the technology advances, and Dan can speak about that more than I can, have put us in a new level of information and preparedness that they had in those days. So I don't think, even though there's records of the high tides, the tide in 14 was like the highest at the time that they had recorded, and I don't think we came to 44 when the next highest tide was recorded during a flood, and a storm. So I don't think they were as aware as we are today of the devastation. Recently we just watched Florence, and the worst part of Florence, besides hitting the shore, was the aftermath of the rain coming down through the mountains and flooding.
It's still coming down today.
100 miles away from the coast. People can't even be in their houses because they're flooded out.
And most of those people didn't have flood insurance because it wasn't necessary.
They weren't near a coast.
And I also think, in addition to the weather information being more reliable today, I think boardwalk construction is a little more reliable too. So in towns like Ocean City rebuild or refortify the boardwalk, it might be a little more, be able to withstand storms.
Design standards change by FEMA regulations, and as you learn, just like when you build high-rises, the high-rises built today are just withstand unbelievable winds beyond the 150-mile-an-hour mark. So, it's advances in technology, advances in construction and design and engineering that all contribute to a better structure in this day and age.
Do you think, I'm going to be on the spot, this time I am, do you think Margate will ever have, and not in the next year necessarily, do you think there will be a boardwalk in Margate or Longport, running we have dunes now running the length of the island. Do you ever think there'll be a boardwalk?
Well, that's a great question, and you never know, but it is a topic that has come forth, and people, a small group of individuals has presented pretty logically the benefits of having a boardwalk, and I would assess that there are definite benefits. There's also, detriments to it. Again, the cost, the maintenance, things like that nature. So the topic is floated, and the topic is alive. I've spoken recently to the Army Corps of Engineers to see if we could get somebody down here to talk to us about it, because naturally the dunes come under federal regulation, and you know, and again, we have our homeowners on the beachfront to consider, which I think is a strong topic. When you see right to our left here that your viewers can't see, is there's only 20-25 foot from the toe of the dune to the porch of that person's house. So, you know, again, the dialogue will happen. It's an open concept, and the discussion will continue.
Anything you want to add, Commissioner?
Well, in the end, I always appreciate being a guest on your show, Dan, and Palma, for the great job you do and Dan does. I want to thank again Gwen Mead and the Margate Historical Society. Gwen is a librarian for the Margate Library, and she's done the extensive research that I was able to bring forth and learn about. And I think it, you know, being on this location on the Margate Pier, I want to thank, and I know I'm taking some of your thunder, I want to thank the Margate Pier organization for allowing us to come here. It's a very appropriate venue to do your show.
And about your research, I think that proves that there are some topics that the local library has a lot more information than Google does. Because I did Google the Boardwalk, and I have found not nearly
I have contracts, I have papers, after
information
papers.
that, yeah.
Libraries
pictures,
have a lot
too.
of relevance
Right.
today, which is great. You're absolutely
Absolutely.
right. Yeah, this is a special edition of Tidal Flooding Talk brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. Of course, you can always visit our website.
njcoastalcoalition.com.
And you know, this is a nonprofit agency, you know, doing work for the community. We always, you know, happily accept donations to be able to continue to spread the word and kind of do what we do. And we love doing it every Sunday night at the Irish Pub. Tomorrow we'll be talking house moving,
Right.
which you know, an interesting
Leave
topic.
out.
And we've seen that along some of the coastal communities as well. And we want to thank Commissioner Amodeo for visit number 2
Thank you, Dan.
and our
you,
first
my
on
pleasure.
location shot.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You know, not being able to see the comments today, well, yeah, if there are any questions or comments, or we will address them separately via text after the show. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and hope you guys enjoy the start of fall. Fall begins officially 9:54 tonight, so this is your last summer day. to get
Today
down to
is
the beach.
and today is the Margate Fall Fun Fest as well. If you're around Margate, you can stop by. The beaches here are no longer guarded, correct?
Correct. Last Sunday was the last day.
And there are some rips out there today, so of course, I mean, the water's still inviting, but definitely want to use caution. No tidal flooding expected, which is good, though. As we wrap up this special edition of Tidal Flooding Talk, hope you have a good weekend.
Was there a lot of movement in the camera?
Couldn't finish, I can't.